The night the candle burned blue, Lila realized the house was listening. The old cottage crouched at the edge of the marsh, not so much built as grown from it. Floorboards that smelled of brine, window panes that clung to salt like the memory of storms, a roofline bowed like the back of a gull mid-cry. She had driven 10 hours along the coast to reach it, trading city light for headlight, headlight for fog, fog for the kind of darkness that made the stars sharpen. She had a single suitcase, a thermos of bitter coffee, and a real estate folder with the words "Sale as is" clipped in angry red. "As is," she said aloud as she wrestled the door open. The door stuck the way it had when she was a kid, catching at the same scar along the jamb. As is felt like permission and warning. She'd come to clean the place out after her grandmother died in late autumn. There had been no will, only a postcard in Lila's mailbox with a postmark from their town, and 3 words in a looping hand: "You'll know when." The postcard wasn't signed. It didn't need to be. Nana Dory was the only person Lila knew who called a thing inevitable by the gentlest name it could bear. Inside, the house exhaled cold. The living room was a museum of the earth tones the 70s had married and refused to divorce. A crocheted afghan draped over the couch like a stubborn habit. Seashells lined the mantel in order of size, not beauty. In the kitchen, the enamel pot sat on the stove where it had always sat, the way a cat keeps a chair warm long after its person has left the room. Lila clicked on the lamp over the sink and found moth bodies gravitated to the shade like punctuation. Then she saw the candle on the kitchen table. Sailors called them storm candles, a thick column of tallow in a glass hurricane, meant to burn slow through wind. She'd hated it as a kid. The wax ran like cartilage, the wick crusted to a black scab, the flame guttered and hissed if you breathed too near. But whenever Lila had stayed the summer with Nana, the candle was always the first thing lit after sunset. "It tells me the weather better than barometers do," Nana would say. And Lila, solemn at 8, would nod like a colleague. Now it sat dead and dusted. Lila wiped the rim with the cuff of her sweater, struck a match and watched the wick catch. The flame rose, licked the glass and steadied into a small insistent tongue. She poured water from the tap to drink, then spat it back. The pipes coughed rust. The water tasted of coins. She'd need to boil it. She set the kettle on the back burner, and out of habit glanced at the candle. The flame had changed color. No longer the domestic gold of kitchen miracles, it deepened to a hard pinched blue. Gas stove blue, hot and self-possessed. It turned blue as if, in the old stories, it had scented something invisible walking through the room. Gas leak. She whispered to the air, although she knew there was no gas line, only an ancient electric oven and enough wiring in the walls to knit a sweater of sparks. She stood, heart doing hard work in a small space. The blue did not waver. It looked like the precise color of a truth you could ruin yourself by ignoring. She remembered the postcard. "You'll know when." "When what?" she asked the empty house. The kettle was the only thing that answered, ticking as it warmed, like a tiny animal settling deeper into sleep. She blew out the candle. The room went dull. She waited stupidly, as if the air might applaud or boo. When nothing combusted, she lit it again, and again the flame rose blue. Morning made the marsh look almost friendly, its water skinned with ice like a bruise healing. Lila found the house register in the hall drawer, the place where Nana had written the small wars and treaties of domestic life. Oiled the hinges, June 12th. Mr. Klein mended fence. Paid in scallops. Storm took shingles. Storm returned them on the porch, July 8th. She loved that last line. That was the house she'd grown up visiting, the kind that insisted anything taken would come back if you loved it, precisely enough. Beneath the register lay a folded map, so soft it had learned to be cloth. Lila unfolded it over the kitchen table, pushing aside the candle, as if it were a person in a cafe who'd finagled a seat it didn't deserve. The map was of the estuary, and the town where the river met the ocean. Dory's handwriting dotted its edges, arrows toward the jetty, a star by the bait shop. A square around the lighthouse, now decommissioned and turned museum, scrawled across the marsh, in that same looping hand, was a sentence the map didn't ask for. If you don't find the answer on land, try the water, but go with someone who knows the difference. Lila read it 3 times. She wasn't the sort of person who read clues into things. She managed a clinic in the city. She triaged, coded, billed. Her days were numbers and outcomes. But grief made a detective of everyone eventually. You found yourself investigating the person who had been here yesterday and had left no forwarding address. You followed clues that were more like excuses. There was a reason children loved mystery books. Someone always came home at the end, even if it was just a feral cat with a ribbon around its neck. She stuffed the map in her tote and drove into town. The diner had not changed its mind about the decade. The coffee was still strong enough to sand cabinets with. The owner's daughter, Ruth, now the owner herself, at least if the ash-blonde bun and the practical shoes were any indication, recognized Lila by the tilt of her chin. You came, Ruth said, as if they'd made a plan in a past life to meet on this exact day. She poured coffee without asking, and added a slice of lemon pie that looked like a friendly mistake. My mother said you would. Did she? Lila took the coffee anyway. How's your mother? Opinionated and knitting. She cried when your grandmother died. Said it was like someone had gone and tidied the horizon. Ruth leaned into the counter, soft with certainty. You staying long? Until the house is sorted, Lila said. If you know a good contractor. I know a good lawyer who'll cry when he opens my bill. You'll want Roe, Ruth said. He does roofs and boats, and some days he can tell you which is which. She wrote a number on a napkin. He's been keeping the lighthouse running for the museum. That's all volunteers now. Likes to pretend he lives in a time when lamps still meant something. Lamps mean something, Lila said, thinking of the blue candle. If they're the right color. Ruth paused, the way people do when they decide whether they are in the company of sense or story. You saw it? Thurston see you what? The blue, Ruth said. Some folks say it's superstition, drafts and science and so. My mother swears it's a sign when there's a reckoning on the way. Reckoning sounds like taxes, Lila said. Deflecting the way you deflect when a question might find you unready. My mother says it's more like weather for a person, Ruth said. Not good or bad. Just coming. She nodded toward the window, where the mastheads in the harbor pricked the sky like needles. You should visit the lighthouse tomorrow. The tide'll be right to see the flats, and Ro will be there cussing at history. Why tomorrow? Because my mother said tomorrow, and you do not invite misery by proving her wrong. Lila had learned as a kid not to argue with sentences built like doors. That night, the candle burned blue in increments, flaring, settling, as if whatever moved through the house had chosen to pace. Lila made a pallet on the living room floor, wrapped herself in the crocheted afghan despite its itch, and listened to the marsh muscling itself toward the tide. The wind sent its shoulders against the siding. The house replied with a groan that was half complaint, half courtesy. She slept and dreamed she was 8 again, dragging the hem of her nightgown across the cold kitchen tile, watching Nana Dory hold a candle like a compass. Why do you keep lighting it? Child Lila asked. Because you keep asking, Dream Dory said, and set the candle by the sink where the wind riffled it. Some lights are for seeing. Some lights are for being seen. Lila woke to frost painting a white surprise on the windows. The candle had burned down to a new ring. Beside it, someone had left a small white stone, flat on one side and smooth as language. She turned in a circle once, like a dog trying to find the dip in its own bed. She wasn't the kind of person who frightened easy. Worry was her worst habit, but worry was not the same as fear. Still, there are moments that make you aware of your body at once. The quickening, the rise, the part of you that climbs a ladder inside your own chest to look out. She breathed, and the air breathed with her. The stone sat there as if it had always owned the table, Lila touched it and found it was not cold. She slipped it into her pocket, because that is what we do with objects we do not yet know how to name. The lighthouse at the jetty was the kind of white that made a cloud apologize. It had been decommissioned when Lila was little, then revived as a museum where tourists climbed narrow stairs to admire other times from a safe height. Roe was easy to find, exactly where Ruth said he would be, cussing at history. He stood in a halo of tools, a crescent wrench in his fist like a sermon, a cap pulled low over eyes as kind as the first 10 minutes of a rain. "You're Dory's girl," he said. Not a question, but an early statement of fact, like bedrock. "You have her cheekbones. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you." Lila stuffed her hands in her coat pockets, less to warm herself than to keep from touching everything and making it remember her. "I'm told you fix roofs and boats." "I have a roof that thinks it's a boat." "I can talk it out of that," he said, and glanced past her shoulder toward the marsh as if it had answered. "Storm season's been showing off. What did you need?" "A survey," she said. "A list." A translation of groans. He smiled at that. A slow smile that made the lighthouse seem less like a monument and more like a tall agreement. "I can do that. But you're here for another reason first." "Am I?" "You brought the candlestone," Rose said. "I can see the bulge in your pocket." She stiffened, which was ridiculous. "Do I know you?" "You know the town," he said easy, "and the town knows what Dory taught." She placed her stones when the candle burned blue. Not always in the same place. Sometimes by the door, sometimes on the windowsill, sometimes in a pocket the person didn't know they had. He wiped his hands on a rag without looking down. When the stone shows up, it means there's something the living need to attend. And the dead won't trust time to handle. Ghosts, Lila said, because she could either say it and put it on the table like salt, or not say it and carry it under her tongue. Reckonings, Roe corrected, as if gently moving a glass away from the edge. If that frightens you, call it methane and drafts. Science will not complain. But you came here, Lila swallowed. "My brother," she said, and the word was a taste she hadn't allowed herself in a long while. "Gerhin. He disappeared the summer I turned 13. We were here for 2 weeks, and one night he took the dinghy out to the sandbar and didn't come back. They said the tide got him, that he misread the water. We never found him." Rose's face did not pity. It steadied. "And the candle. Last night it burned blue," she said, "and this morning the stone appeared. I don't know if I'm making meaning out of household stuff. I don't know if I want to be." Roe pointed up the tower. "Come on. It's clearer where the light used to turn." They climbed the stairs tight as a secret. At the top the lens assembly gleamed still, glass-petaled like a rigid flower. From there the marsh looked like the inside of a lung-breathing tide. The flat stretched out toward the bar, a pale back under a silk sheet of water. "Blue means clean burn," Rose said. "Means the wick is right, the air is right. Also means other things if you're in the habit of meaning." Dory was. She said once that when her candle burned blue, it was because someone she loved had something left to say, and her house had good hearing. "Aaron didn't leave a body," Lila said. "He didn't leave a note. He left a space, and the space learned to walk on its own and sit at our table and go to school with me, and clip my hair too short." "That is what spaces do," Rose said. "They learn to do tricks. Did you go looking?" "My mother and I searched the shore for a month," Lila said. "We learned everyone's dogs' names. We learned how to ask strangers, 'Have you seen a boy?' without crying on their shirts." She exhaled into the cold, which made her grief visible for a second, proof and vanishing. "We did not learn how to end the sentence." Roe knelt by the lens as if consulting an old friend. "Low tide at dusk. Flats will be walkable if you know where the marsh keeps its hands. Come back with boots and bring the stone. We'll see what the water chooses to remember. What will we be looking for? Something that stayed where it shouldn't," he said. "Or something that moved and thought it was staying." The marsh is a poor archivist. It's a brilliant magician. At dusk the marsh peeled back its water like a curtain. Ro led the way with a staff he called a marsh stick, tapping the ground ahead as if calling its attention. Lila followed with the stone in her pocket and a new candle. She'd brought it in a jar because that felt like asking for civility. The air had a metallic brightness, the sky a bruise violeting toward night. They reached the sandbar before the tide had time to change its mind. Ro stopped. "Your brother favored the old channel," he said. "If he cut across at the wrong angle, a seam would open under him. It's how the marsh confusingly breathes. Watch your step." The surface looked solid, but the stick found a give in it like cake. Beyond them, the lighthouse stood white and concerned. "Set the candle there," Ro said, pointing to a patch of dark gravel. "Set the stone beside it. Then we wait. The wind will tell us whether we are foolish." They lit the candle. The flame rose gold mannily. The water folded its gloss somewhere else, pretending not to notice. "Do you believe this?" Lila asked. "Or do you believe the belief is good for people like me?" Ro tilted his head. "I believe some things only show themselves to those who've decided not to scold what they don't understand." "Convenient," she said, but her voice was not unkind. The candle's flame tightened, brightened, and Lila's breath caught blued, faintly as if it were remembering how. The wick made a sound like a small animal changing its mind. "Blue," Ro said softly. "Your house is nosy, but it is not wrong." The wind grew curious. It nosed at the hem of Lila's coat, at the jar, at the hollow where the sandbar sloped. And then Lila heard it, a clink sharp and unceremonious, as if the world had dropped a spoon. Ro tapped the spot with the stick. The earth gave. He dug with his hands, not frenzied but insistent, the way you dig when you know exactly what you're trying to talk out of bed. A moment later his fingers struck metal. He tugged, and a rusted chain rose like a sentence long unsaid. "A mooring," he said. "Old one. It must have snagged his dinghy when the tide pulled. If the rope wrapped his leg—" "Don't!" Lila's voice was all tendon. She crouched and helped, pulling up a coil of chain and then something more. The mouth of a tin box, corroded but intact. Ro worked the lid with a chisel he produced from a pocket like magician's proof. It popped. The smell was old paper and salt, ink eager to tell its story. Inside lay a bundle of letters tied with blue ribbon and a compass, small as a plum and engraved with initials that made Lila's bones recognize themselves. "A.L. Arin Leo," she said before she could stop herself. Their father had given him the middle name that meant lion, because he had been the kind of man who needed his kids to sound braver than he felt. The compass had been his because he believed in North. He'd given it to Arin because he could not hold on to himself. Ro handed the box to Lila. "He must have kept them in the dinghy," he said. "Maybe he meant to bury them on the bar. Maybe to keep them safe from the damp in the cottage." Tide turned on him. Chain held him. The marsh wrote its favorite story. It was no one's fault. It was nobody's intention. Lila unwrapped the letters. The topmost was addressed to her in Arin's skidding hand. "If I don't come back by dinner, I've gone to talk to the part of the water that knows Dad's voice." Ridiculous, I know, but I keep thinking we missed something in the way he left. You say grief is a room we have to learn how to use. I want to see if there's a window. If there isn't, I'll be home before the pie cools. Don't tell Nana. She'll only laugh and be right. Another letter lay beneath. The paper reusing a grocery list, sugar, salt, flour, something for the gulls. On the back, Arin had drawn the sandbar like a tongue, the channel like a throat, arrows alarming their way around. The last note was brief as a held breath. "El, if you find these, it means I got clumsy or the marsh got clever. Don't call it the water's fault. It never is. Keep the compass. Keep the candle. If it burns blue, it doesn't mean I'm near. It means you are nearer to whatever you need to hear." She stood there with the letters, the candle blue as a held truth. The compass heavy in her palm made her feel like the map it belonged to. For a moment, the world was so quiet that the only sound was the wick's soft music and the out-there lapping of the tide reading itself. She realized, slowly then all at once, the house had not been telling her that Arin was close. It had been telling her she had come close enough. "Will the marsh take this back?" she asked. "Only if you let it," Rose said. But something in his tone allowed for the possibility of mercy. They replaced the chain, tucked the empty box back into its cradle, and pressed the sand down with their hands, like smoothing a bed a child has left without taking their favorite bear. Lila pocketed the compass and letters. She left the stone by the jar. The candle burned blue and then softened gold again, like a wound that had decided not to keep being one. As they walked back, the flats murmured underfoot. The sky had chosen a color that made the lighthouse look like it had invented light. Rose said nothing, which was the kind of kindness some people forget is available to them. At the top of the path, he stopped. "You'll want to keep the candle in your kitchen," he said. "Let it tell you what it knows, and when it's done, let it be a candle again." "What does that mean?" "For that we don't live at the height of our moments," he said, a small smile borrowing his mouth. "We visit there and return. The washing still needs doing. The roof still thinks it is a boat. Grief does not grant absolution to broken shingles." Lila laughed before she could cry. "Will you look at the roof tomorrow?" "I'll bring shingles and the correct kind of persuasion," he said. "And if it burns blue again?" "Then you'll watch and decide whether it means weather," he said. "Not all blue is a message. Sometimes it's just the wick proud of itself." The days made a sort of piecemeal order. Lila worked through the rooms, keeping what would fit into the trunk of her car, giving away what could be loved by someone with more of a porch. She took down the curtains and let the windows see what they had missed. She found in a pantry jar mislabeled Morel's 1991, a clutch of beach glass the color of old liquor bottles, which she strung on fishing line and hung from a nail where the light could teach them how to be bells. Ro came each morning with the weather. He climbed the roof and talked sense to it. He patched the porch and taught its boards to remember the shape of a person standing still. He told Lila stories about the lighthouse's old keepers, the woman who baked bread for every ship she saw through fog, the man who named his cat Lantern because he wanted to seem as if he had a sense of humor. Sometimes Ruth stopped by with pie or gossip, and once her mother came with a talisman she claimed had cured 6 headaches and a marriage. "You don't have to use it," she said, "but it will keep itself busy." The candle burned blue only once in that week, on a morning when the rain arrived so suddenly the marsh looked surprised. Lila set her mug by the jar and waited. The flame flared, settled, and then, perhaps because she had not asked it a question, stayed the ordinary color of toast. She felt not disappointment exactly, but relief, the shape of something learning to stand with its own weight again. On her last night in the house, she opened all the windows the way a person cracks all the knuckles in both hands. The sound was small and satisfying. She placed the compass on the map where Aaron had drawn the sandbar and left it there, not as a grave marker, because he was now everywhere the water had work to do, but as a promise that she would not lose herself again in trying to find him. She lit the candle and carried it from room to room, saying a goodbye that did not need her voice. In the kitchen, she set it on the table one last time. The flame made the water in her glass look as if it had remembered it was ocean. She reached into her pocket for the stone and found it smooth with handling, as if it had learned the lines of her hand. She put it on the table beside the jar. "Some lights are for being seen," she said softly to the room. "So see me, I came. I knew when." She slept on the floor again by choice under the crocheted afghan that now felt like the compromise blankets teach you how to be both warm and slightly dissatisfied. In the morning, she would drive back to the city. She would return on weekends until the papers were signed, and the roof obeyed gravity. She would keep the compass in her coat and the letters in a box under her bed. She would mail Ruth payment and pies. She would bring Ro a sandwich and pretend not to notice when he pretended not to be grateful. In the blue hour just before dawn, she woke to the faintest draught. The candle on the table did not waver, but the air near her cheek moved like a careful hand. It smelled of salt and winter, and there, at the place where the light failed to reach, She saw what she would later tell no one about. Not even Ro, not even Ruth. A ripple in the dark. Like a boy running through tall grass and refusing to look back because he trusted you to be there when he turned. She did not get up. She did not call his name. She let the candle be a candle and the blue become something she could live with. When morning came, the flame had burned low and gold. The stone was gone. In its place lay a single pale feather from the marsh, light enough to move if anyone breathed too hard, heavy enough to stay if she asked it. Lila stood, folded the afghan, and began to put the house to rights. The kettle sang. The windows agreed. Somewhere in the marsh, the tide rolled over the sandbar and chose not to take everything this time. As she locked the door, she glanced back once, not to ensure she was leaving something behind, but to confirm she was taking with her what had finally agreed to be carried. The candle's glass caught the light and flashed one brief, honest blue. It was enough.